A young billionaire arrives home and finds two poor twin girls at his gate. They shout, "Dad, we finally found you." He responds in shock, "Impossible. I can't be a father. I'm infertile." But when one of them shows him a photo, he begins to cry. The orange sky of late afternoon cast long shadows as Noah Livingston drove toward home. After an exhausting day of meetings and contracts, all he wanted was the silence of his mansion. He turned onto the tree-lined road and caught sight of his property, imposing, with flawless gardens and completely empty. As always. Then he noticed something unusual. Two little girls stood by the main gate, one fidgeting, the other holding a piece of paper. Noah frowned. Children were not a common sight in this upscale neighborhood of isolated mansions. He stopped the car and got out, intrigued. The girls turned, and their faces lit up with a joy that unsettled him. "Dad, we found you," the more talkative one shouted, jumping excitedly. Noah froze in his tracks. "Dad, impossible." "Look, there's been a mistake," he said, keeping his distance. "I don't have kids. I'm infertile." The last word came out almost like a secret, a diagnosis from 3 years ago that had destroyed any possibility of fatherhood. Not that it bothered him. Noah had always prioritized career and independence. The girls exchanged confused looks. The quieter one stepped forward. Without a word, she pulled a photograph from her pocket and held it out to him. Noah hesitated before taking it. When he finally looked at the image, his chest tightened. It was him, years younger, sitting on a park bench with Emily. Emily, with her dark hair, spontaneous laughter, her fingers entwined with his. His eyes burned, and to his surprise, a tear rolled down his cheek. He wiped it away quickly, but the girls noticed. "You cry too when you see the photo," the quieter one murmured, displaying a startling wisdom for someone so young. Noah took a deep breath, trying to pull himself together. Emily, the woman he had loved and let go 6 years earlier. He looked from the girls to the photo again. The resemblance was undeniable. Emily's almond-shaped eyes, the same face shape. "How did you—" he began, but couldn't finish. "Our mom doesn't know we're here," said the chatty girl. "We took a cab by ourselves." "Lily," the other girl scolded, glancing around nervously. "Lily and Grace." Their names came to Noah's mind automatically, without him knowing how. He looked at the photo again, fighting the surge of emotion. His daughters with Emily. Impossible. The doctors had been clear. "Are you mad at us?" Grace asked, so softly that Noah almost didn't hear. The question brought him back to reality. Two children, alone at his gate, needed help, no matter who they were. "I'm not mad," he replied, tucking the photo into his pocket. "But we need to talk, and you can't stay out here." Noah opened the gate and invited them in. The girls followed him along the stone walkway, gazing in wonder at everything. Lily walked confidently, Grace more hesitant, studying Noah as if she wanted to memorize every detail. "Wow," Lily whispered as they entered the imposing foyer. "Your house is like a castle." "It's way too big for just one person," Noah admitted, aware of the empty space around him. In the modern kitchen, Noah offered them hot chocolate, which they eagerly accepted. While he prepared the drinks, his mind raced. If these girls were Emily's daughters, how could they be his? The infertility diagnosis had come after a severe infection. Emily had been with him through the whole treatment. When the doctor broke the news, she cried more than he did. "It doesn't matter," she had said. "We can adopt someday." But Noah had never wanted children. That was one of the reasons for their breakup. Emily wanted a family, roots. He wanted success, freedom. When the chance came to expand his business, requiring constant travel, their relationship fell apart. It ended bitterly, followed by years of silence. And now two girls were calling him Dad. Noah served the hot chocolate and sat across from them. They looked tiny on the tall kitchen stools, legs swinging well above the floor. "How did you find me?" he asked, trying to keep his voice casual. "We saw the photo and heard Uncle Jake talking to Mom," Lily answered between sips. "Uncle Jake?" Noah frowned. Jake was Emily's brother. They'd never gotten along. He showed her a magazine with your interview, Grace explained. About your new projects. Mom acted weird. She asked him to throw it away, Lily added, but we snuck it out after. And it had my address? No, but it had pictures of your house. We asked the neighbor to look it up online. Noah nodded, impressed by the girl's resourcefulness. The magazine must have been the Architectural Digest feature about his mansion from a few months back. Does your mom ever talk about me? He asked, trying to hide his anxiety. The girls exchanged glances. No, Lily finally answered. She never talks. Never? Grace raised her eyes, so much like Emily's. But every time she looks at that photo, she cries. The words fell heavily. Emily's silence over the years now seemed deafening, never speaking of him, only crying over an old photo, and these girls growing up without knowing. Until now. How old are you? He asked, studying their faces. Before they could answer, a rumble of thunder shook the house. All three looked toward the window, where large raindrops began to fall. It's raining, Grace said, worried. The sky, orange just minutes before, was now covered by dark clouds. The downpour quickly intensified. You really came here alone? Without your mom knowing? Noah asked. Lily nodded proudly. We used our piggy bank money and called a cab. I said we were visiting our dad. A pang hit Noah as he imagined Emily discovering her daughters had disappeared. We need to call your mom, he said. But we just got here, Lily protested. We wanted to meet you. And you found me, Noah replied, surprised at the softness in his own voice. But she needs to know where you are. Lightning flashed in the kitchen, followed by a deafening thunderclap. The storm had turned the garden into a curtain of water. You'd better stay until the rain lets up, Noah decided. Can we sleep here? Lily asked, excited. Noah hesitated. Taking care of 2 kids overnight was daunting, but there was no alternative in that thunderstorm. If it doesn't stop, yes. What about Mom? Grace asked, ever the practical one. Tomorrow morning, I'll take you home and explain everything in person. Grace didn't look convinced, but agreed. Have you had dinner? He asked, trying to be pragmatic. They shook their heads. Noah checked what the housekeeper had left in the fridge. Lasagna sounded perfect. While it heated, he showed the girls around, the huge living room, the formal dining room, the study with walls of books. Who's the lady in the photo? Lily asked, pointing to a picture on the wall. My mother. She passed away a long time ago. Do you miss her? Grace asked. Yes. Every day. We only have our grandpa on Mom's side, Lily said. Noah took in the information, trying to piece together the life Emily and the girls had without him. What's your house like? He asked as they headed back to the kitchen. Really small, Lily replied. The ceiling in our room leaks when it rains too much. Mom puts out buckets, Grace added. She planted a few sunflowers out front, where there's sunlight. Noah felt a pang in his chest. Emily always loved flowers, but it seemed she was now growing them in conditions far different from what he had imagined. The lasagna was ready, and they ate together while the storm raged outside. The girls ate with such enthusiasm that Noah wondered if meals like this were common for them. We never eat lasagna at our house, Lily commented, as though reading his thoughts. It's too expensive. What do you usually eat? Noah asked, trying to sound casual. Soupy pasta, Grace replied. Meat only sometimes. Noah hid his reaction. Emily, who once loved cooking elaborate dishes, now seemed to be counting pennies to feed her kids. Mom's friend says I look exactly like her, Grace said, and Lily looks exactly like you. A friend? He asked. Mom's best friend, Lily explained. Sometimes she brings us food when we run out of money before the end of the month. What does your mom do? Noah asked, trying to understand the full situation. She sews for a lot of people, Grace said. Works really late a lot. She gets tired, Lily added. But she always tells us a story before bed. Noah absorbed every detail, building a mental image of Emily struggling to raise 2 daughters alone, working to exhaustion to support them. After dinner, he noticed the girls were getting sleepy. He took them to one of the many guest rooms with 2 twin beds. You can stay here, he said, switching on the lights. The bathroom is over there. Then he realized an obvious problem. They had no pajamas or toothbrushes. He fetched 2 clean t-shirts from his own room and found unused toothbrushes in a drawer. "Will you be okay by yourselves?" he asked uncertainly. "We're already big," Lily declared confidently. "At our house we bathe alone because Mom's working." Noah tried to smile while hiding the ache in his chest, imagining these small children learning to fend for themselves out of necessity. "All right. I'll be downstairs if you need anything." He returned to the kitchen and started cleaning up from dinner. The storm still raged outside, and he pictured Emily, desperate and searching for her daughters. He wanted to call her to say they were safe, but he had no way to contact her. Later, he went upstairs to check on them. They were in bed, wearing his oversized t-shirts. Grace was reading a book from the bedside table. Lily was playing with a teddy bear Noah didn't even know he had. "Everything okay?" he asked from the doorway. They both nodded. "Will you tell us a story?" Lily asked hopefully. Noah hesitated. "I don't know many kids' stories. It doesn't have to be for kids," Grace said. "Anything is fine." After a moment's thought, Noah sat on the edge of the bed. "I can tell you how I met your mom." The girl's eyes lit up. Noah began the story about the coffee shop, a spilled latte, Emily's laughter. It was strange to relive those memories, but also comforting. "Was Mom pretty?" Lily asked. "The prettiest I've ever seen," he answered sincerely. And she laughed in a way that made everyone want to laugh with her. "She still laughs like that," Grace commented, "but only when she's not worried about bills." Another pang in Noah's chest. Emily, still struggling, still living, raising these girls without him, working to the brink to keep a roof over their heads. When he finished the story, Lily was already fighting to keep her eyes open. Grace was still watching him carefully. "Time to sleep," he said, standing up. "Good night." "Good night, Dad," Lily mumbled, half asleep. Grace just smiled, a small but genuine smile that stirred something inside Noah. He turned off the main light, leaving only a lamp on, and left. In the hallway, he paused, trying to process how his life had flipped upside down in a matter of hours. Suddenly, his empty, silent house echoed with children's voices, laughter, and bedtime stories. In his study, Noah sat looking out at the storm that showed no sign of easing. He pulled the photo from his pocket and studied it again. He and Emily, happy, with no idea what lay ahead. A tear slid down his cheek, followed by another. He didn't try to hold them back, and now 2 little girls were sleeping upstairs, girls who called him Dad, who might or might not be his daughters, depending on whom you asked, science or fate. Girls who, along with Emily, lived in circumstances he had never imagined while he piled up wealth in a lonely mansion. Tomorrow, Noah thought. Tomorrow, he would see Emily again after so many years. And maybe then, some pieces of this puzzle would start to make sense. Noah couldn't sleep. His bedroom, usually a peaceful refuge, felt stifling that night. The storm continued outside, but it wasn't the sound of rain that kept him awake. It was the whirlwind in his mind. 2 little girls slept upstairs, 2 children who appeared out of nowhere calling him Dad, 2 small versions of Emily, with traces of him in ways that should have been impossible. Restless, he got up. The clock on the bedside table read 2:14 a.m. He left his room and walked down the hallway, stopping outside the guest room where the girls slept. He gently cracked the door open. Lily lay sprawled across the bed, arms flung in all directions, breathing deeply. Grace was curled up, hugging the teddy bear. A lump formed in Noah's throat. He shut the door and went downstairs. His study, the place he spent most of his time when home, seemed the natural destination for his insomnia. He entered the dark room, switched on only the desk lamp, and sat in the leather chair. The soft light cast warm shadows on the walls lined with books. Something about this moment was unsettling, prompting him to dig into his own memories. He opened the bottom drawer of the desk, the one he rarely used. It was where he kept things he couldn't throw away but didn't want to see often. A drawer of buried memories. He pulled it open and looked through its contents. Some old documents, birthday cards from co-workers, a broken watch that had belonged to his father. At the bottom lay a small box he hadn't opened in years. His heart sped up as he picked it up. Inside was just a single photo, one he hadn't had the heart to destroy, but also couldn't bear to keep in sight. He and Emily, sitting together on a park bench. The same bench in the photo Grace had shown him, but on a different day. In this one, the sky was clear and both wore sunglasses. Emily had her head on his shoulder, and he was smiling at the camera. Noah ran his fingers over the photo. He remembered that day. It was spring, and they'd spent the whole afternoon in the park, planning for the future. It was when Emily first brought up the idea of having kids. "We could live near here," she'd said dreamily. "We'd have a yard for the kids to play." His reaction had been immediate and dismissive. "Kids?" He remembered laughing, as if the idea was absurd. "They just get in the way, Emily. I don't want that." Her face had hardened for a moment, then softened. "That's okay. We still have time for you to change your mind." But he never did. Even when infertility was diagnosed later, he felt a strange sense of relief. It was the perfect excuse, a medical reason to avoid what he never wanted. Emily cried at the news, and he comforted her, pretending to share her sadness. Now staring at the photo, Noah felt a cold wave of guilt wash over him. So focused on his career, so determined to avoid anything that could disrupt his plans, so certain of his choices, and there they were. Two little girls upstairs, sleeping peacefully in the guest room, one talkative and outgoing like him, the other quiet and observant like Emily, both with her eyes that always seemed to see beneath the surface. If they really were his daughters, and the resemblance was undeniable, despite the medical impossibility, it meant Emily had gotten pregnant just before or right after their breakup. It meant she had raised these girls alone, facing hardships he couldn't imagine, while he accumulated wealth and power. Emily who had so desperately wanted a family. Emily, who had believed in him more than he believed in himself. Emily, who had never said a word about the daughters who might be his. And why? Because he had made it clear he didn't want kids. They just get in the way. The words echoed in his mind now, heavy and cruel. What kind of man was he? What kinds of decisions had he made? Noah looked at the photo one more time before slipping it into his shirt pocket. Alongside the other Grace had given him. The storm raged outside, but the real turmoil was within him. He closed the drawer with determination. Tomorrow he would see Emily again, and he was utterly unprepared for that meeting. He stood and walked to the window. Rain still pelted the glass. He was trapped in this situation until morning, at least. Hours to think, to brood, to question every decision that led him here. Upstairs, two girls slept, oblivious to the upheaval they had caused in the life of a stranger who might be their father. Girls with names he somehow knew the moment he saw them. Girls who had grown up not knowing him while he lived ignoring their existence. Another wave of guilt, and stronger than the last, hit him. Not for his past choices, he wasn't ready to face that yet, but for Emily, bearing this burden alone. For those kids growing up without a dad, in a house with leaks, while he lived in a vacant, imposing mansion. Tomorrow, he thought. Tomorrow, he would begin to fix at least part of this mistake. He didn't know how, but he had to do something. Outside, lightning lit up the night sky, followed by a thunderous crash. The storm showed no sign of stopping, just like the storm in his heart. The rain had stopped overnight, leaving behind the smell of wet earth and puddles glistening on the ground. Morning arrived with a clear sky, as if the previous night's storm had never happened. Noah woke early after just a few restless hours of sleep. He automatically prepared breakfast, eggs, toast, orange juice, while thinking about the conversation he would have with Emily. What would he say? How would he explain the girl's sudden appearance? How could he ask about paternity without sounding accusatory? He was setting plates on the table when he heard soft footsteps. He turned to see Lily standing in the kitchen doorway, still wearing the oversized t-shirt from the night before, her hair tousled from sleep. "Good morning," he said, trying to sound normal, as though making breakfast for children was part of his daily routine. Lily studied him for a moment, her head slightly tilted. Then, without any preamble, she asked, "Do you want to see Mom?" The directness of her question caught him off guard. It was exactly his plan, but hearing the girl say it so simply made the reality of the situation hit harder. "Yes," he finally answered. "We need to take you both home. She must be very worried." Lily nodded, as though everything was going exactly as intended. "Grace knows the way," she said, climbing onto one of the kitchen chairs and eyeing the food on the table with interest. "She always remembers where everything is." As if summoned by her name, Grace appeared in the doorway, already dressed in the same clothes as the day before, neatly folded and put on again. Unlike her sister, she seemed fully awake and ready for anything. "Good morning," she greeted politely. "I made breakfast," Noah offered, receiving enthusiastic acceptance from Lily and a quiet thank you from Grace. As the girls ate, Noah watched them discreetly. Two little people who'd appeared out of nowhere and turned his life upside down in a matter of hours. What effect would they have on his life from now on? What would Emily say when she saw him at her door? "Finish eating, then get ready, okay," he said, getting up from the table. "I'll get ready too, and then we'll take you home." Half an hour later, the three of them were in Noah's car, the girls in the back seat, their heads barely reaching the window. Noah adjusted the rearview mirror so he could see them. "So, which way?" he asked. "Go straight," Grace instructed, naturally taking on the role of navigator. "Then turn left at the traffic light." Noah obeyed, realizing they were heading to a part of the city he rarely visited. As they continued, the houses got smaller, more modest, the streets less tree-lined. "There's a flower shop," Lily exclaimed excitedly as they passed a small store with buckets of flowers out front. "We always pass it on our way home from school." "Now turn right," Grace directed. "It's the street with the noisy dog." Sure enough, as soon as they turned the corner, a yellow Labrador began barking aggressively from behind a low fence. Lily laughed. "That's Rex. He barks at everyone." Noah felt like an explorer in unknown territory, guided by the flawless memory of two children. This was their world, the flower shop, the barking dog, rows of modest homes, a world completely different from his, filled with executive meetings, million-dollar contracts, and business dinners. "It's the next street," Grace said. "Our house has a blue door." Noah turned onto the indicated street, slowing down. It was a row of small, older, attached houses, most well-kept with limited resources. Some had tiny front yards, others just a couple of potted plants. "There!" Lily exclaimed, pointing. Noah saw it immediately. Among the homes, one stood out not because of size or luxury, but because of a light blue painted door. Sweeping the fallen leaves from the previous night's storm on the sidewalk was Emily. His heart pounded. Emily. The years had been kind to her, despite everything. Her dark hair was shorter now, tied in a simple ponytail. She wore jeans and a plain white blouse. Small lines around her eyes suggested both worry and laughter. Probably both. She seemed focused on her task, oblivious to the world around her. Noah parked at the curb. The girls were already unbuckling before he turned off the engine, eager to see their mother. "Mom!" Lily shouted, flinging open the door and running toward Emily. Emily looked up. First, her face lit with pure relief at the sight of her daughters, an unguarded wave of emotion easing every tense muscle. Then, her gaze found Noah stepping out of the car, and all color seemed to drain from her face. The broom slipped from her hands, clattering on the ground in the silent street. For a moment, she stood utterly still, as if seeing a ghost. Perhaps she was, in a way. Lily was already hugging her legs, speaking in an excited rush of explanations, but Emily seemed not to hear. Her eyes remained locked on Noah, a blur of emotions moving too quickly to decipher. Surprise, fear, maybe anger, and something else, something Noah couldn't name. Grace approached more slowly, as though she understood the gravity of the moment. She took her mother's hand, gently tugging her back to reality. Noah walked toward them, feeling as though each step was both too fast and painfully slow. His luxurious car looked out of place in front of the modest home with the blue door, just as he felt out of place with his expensive coat and polished shoes. He had 1,000 words in his mind, countless questions, explanations he could offer. He thought of the photos in his pocket, the sleepless hours of the night before, the sight of the girls asleep under his roof. He considered saying he was confused, that he needed answers, that he didn't understand how any of this was possible. But as he reached Emily, seeing her for the first time in 6 years, with her daughters who might be his, by her side, all he managed to say was, "Hi, Emily." Emily did not respond to Noah's greeting. She only bent down to hug her girls, squeezing them tightly as if afraid they might vanish. Noah watched silently, feeling like an intruder in that intimate family moment. Emily's hands trembled slightly as she stroked the girl's hair, and when she finally spoke, her voice wavered between relief and reprimand. "Do you have any idea how scared I was? I spent the entire night awake, searching everywhere. I called the police and the hospitals, every neighbor." "I'm sorry, Mom," Grace murmured, ever sensitive to others' emotions. "We just wanted to meet him." "The storm got really bad," Lily chimed in quickly, as though offering an irrefutable excuse. "So we had to sleep there, at his huge house. It has a ton of empty rooms and a kitchen like a restaurant." Emily finally looked up at Noah, and he could see the conflict in her gaze, the relief at having her daughters back fighting against the tension of seeing him standing there in front of her house, like a ghost from another time. Her eyes, still the same shade of brown he remembered, seemed deeper now, marked by years of struggles he was only beginning to see. "Can we talk?" Noah asked, his voice quieter than he intended. For a moment, Emily seemed ready to refuse. Her hands tightened protectively on the girl's shoulders, and something in her eyes hardened. Then, with a resigned sigh, she nodded. "Girls, go inside and change out of those clothes," she ordered in a tone that allowed no argument. "Then pick up the toys you left scattered around before you left." The final words carried a weight Noah couldn't miss. The girls, sensing the seriousness of the moment, obeyed without protest. Lily cast one last curious look at Noah before disappearing through the blue door, a quick smile on her mischievous face. Grace only gave a discreet wave, a gesture that felt like a goodbye. Emily held the door open in silent invitation for Noah to enter. He hesitated briefly, then followed her inside, ducking his head slightly to fit through the doorway that felt made for smaller frames. The interior was exactly as the girls had described, small but clean and tidy, with simple furniture worn by use. The living room, where Emily led him, had a two-seater couch covered by a colorful throw that concealed worn upholstery. A simple shelf held a few books, some photos in inexpensive frames, and small decorations Noah guessed the girls had picked out. Colorful stones, shells, a plastic unicorn. A few visible patches on the walls hinted at leaks, stains from water damage covered by paint that didn't exactly match the original color. In one corner, a sewing machine surrounded by fabrics and patterns testified to Emily's work. A stack of folded clothes waited beside it, likely ready for delivery. It was a modest home, but undeniably welcoming. "They showed up at my house last night," Noah explained, feeling the need to clarify immediately, the words tumbling out. "During the storm. They were soaked and cold. I didn't think it was safe to bring them back in that downpour." Emily nodded, lips pressed into a thin line. "I figured something like that when I saw your car." She paused, her eyes studying Noah's face as if searching for something. "You brought them back safely." "Thank you." The formal thanks felt strange between them, almost painful in its politeness. There was a time when they needed no words at all, when a single look conveyed more than whole sentences. "Did you know they were coming to look for me?" Noah asked, striving to keep the conversation neutral for now. "Not exactly," Emily sighed, gesturing for Noah to sit on the worn couch while she stayed standing, as though she needed that extra height advantage. "I knew they'd run away, obviously. I noticed they were gone when I got back from the sewing shop, but I only figured out where they went when I couldn't find them anywhere nearby, and remembered Jake had left that magazine with your interview here last week." The mention of Jake triggered an automatic response in Noah, a tension in his shoulders, a clench in his jaw that Emily did not miss. "He still doesn't like you," she remarked, a faint trace of irony in her voice. "But it was an accident. He had no idea the girls would see the magazine. He actually brought it just to warn me that you were back in town. He knew about the girls, that they might be mine." Emily nodded. "Jake and my parents were the only ones who knew from the start. And Claire, my longtime friend, Noah sank into the worn couch, feeling completely out of place in this environment, so different from his own world. His luxury watch, designer coat, even his posture, everything screamed that he didn't belong here. Silence lingered for a few seconds, heavy as a storm cloud. "They called me Dad," he finally said, his voice almost a whisper. Then, more firmly, "Emily, is that possible? Are they my daughters?" Emily closed her eyes for a moment, as though gathering strength for a long, postponed battle. When she opened them again, they held a determination Noah recognized all too well. The same determination he'd seen when she pursued her fashion design career against her parents' wishes. The same she'd shown facing every obstacle in her life. "Yes," she said simply. Even though he'd expected it, the confirmation hit Noah like a physical blow. He leaned forward, pressing his hands to his face, trying to process this information. Blood pulsed in his ears, muffling all other sounds. "But how?" he asked, his voice muffled behind his hands. He looked up, visibly shaken, his eyes searching hers. "I was diagnosed as infertile 3 years ago after that infection. I had no idea it was possible." Emily finally sat, choosing a chair facing him rather than the empty space on the couch by his side. The physical distance between them perfectly symbolized the gulf 6 years of absence had created. "A little after we broke up, I found out I was pregnant," she explained calmly, her hands resting in her lap with a composure Noah guessed was hard-won. "About 2 weeks after you left for that business trip, the one that was supposed to be short, remember?" Noah nodded, guilt tightening his chest. The trip that should have lasted 2 weeks dragged on for 2 months. "A unique opportunity," he had told her on the phone, while Emily drifted further away with each call, the beginning of the end for them. "At first, I thought about calling you," Emily continued, her gaze fixed on some distant point, as if revisiting those difficult days. "I even picked up the phone several times. But you were so excited about the new contracts, so focused on your career, and our recent conversations had been so tense." "You should have told me," Noah murmured, a note of accusation slipping into his voice that he immediately regretted. Emily raised her chin, her eyes growing slightly colder, an old flame of defiance rekindled in them. "For what, Noah?" "So you'd feel forced to come back, to tell me you had no time for children, that they'd get in the way of your plans." She paused, taking a deep breath, clearly controlling her tone so the girls wouldn't overhear in the other room. "You made it very clear many times what you thought about having kids. Remember that afternoon in the park, when I mentioned children and you laughed, saying they'd get in your way?" Noah recalled the scene with painful clarity. The sunny day, Emily leaning against him on the bench, her casual mention of kids playing, and his nearly defensive response. "They just get in the way." "I don't want that. I chose not to look for you because I knew who you were back then," Emily continued, her voice softer now, but still resolute. "I preferred raising the girls with honesty, rather than with fear that you'd do everything out of obligation." The words cut Noah with surgical precision. It was exactly what he would have done. Fulfilled his obligation, perhaps financially, but without enthusiasm, without true commitment. Emily had known him better than he knew himself, and that realization was both comforting and disturbing. "What about the infertility diagnosis?" he asked, still grappling with how medical facts and the reality before him could collide so starkly. Emily shrugged, in that way she often did when accepting small defeats to focus on what really mattered. "Exactly when was that?" 3 years ago. After a severe infection I got in Asia. I almost died," he added, realizing she probably didn't know. "Doctors said the damage was permanent." "The girls were almost 2 years old by then," Emily replied calmly. "Whatever caused your infertility apparently happened after they were conceived." Noah processed this slowly, pieces of the puzzle finally snapping into place. That infection, which nearly killed him and left permanent damage, happened long after his relationship with Emily ended. "When I found out I was pregnant, I did a lot of research," Emily went on. "I discovered a condition called cryptorchidism, undescended testicle in childhood, something like that. It can cause fertility problems later, especially if worsened by an infection, which I guess was your case, But fertility isn't necessarily zero, just reduced. Noah looked at her with new admiration. Emily had always been thorough, dedicated to understanding everything in detail, whether it was sewing patterns or apparently complex medical conditions. "Why didn't you ever come to me for financial help at least?" he asked, glancing around the modest house, noticing the absurd contrast with his own mansion. "You're clearly struggling to raise them alone." Emily straightened, a flicker of wounded pride crossing her face. Her eyes flashed dangerously, reminding Noah how fierce she could be when underestimated. "We manage just fine," she replied firmly. "I work hard, have sewing clients, do some freelance design gigs when they come up. It's not luxurious, but the girls have what they need: food, clothes, books, a few toys. We have basic medical coverage through a public plan." Noah thought about the leaks in the ceiling, the simple meals the girls mentioned, their worn but well-kept clothes. He compared it to his own huge, empty house, where even the dog, if he'd had one, would probably get gourmet food from France. "What about my name on their birth certificates?" he asked suddenly, realizing the legal aspect should have been his first concern. "It's not there," Emily said without hesitation. "Legally, they're just my daughters." Noah felt a stab of something he couldn't define. Relief or disappointment, maybe both. Part of him, the businessman and strategist, appreciated the legal simplicity. Another part felt strangely hurt that he didn't officially exist as their father. "Noah," Emily sighed, her voice softer now, carrying an old hint of intimacy. "I never intended to hide them from you forever. As they grew, it was clear they'd eventually ask about their father. I always told them the truth, that he was far away, building his career, and that maybe one day he'd want to meet them. They accepted that." "Kids accept a lot," Emily answered with a tinge of sadness in her smile. "They're incredibly adaptable, but lately, especially Lily, started asking more questions. When they saw your photo in that magazine, they decided to take the initiative," Noah finished, recalling Lily's determined expression when he'd found them at his gate. A silence fell between them, broken only by the distant sounds of the girls talking in another room, high-pitched voices and occasional giggles that sounded surreal in the midst of that tense conversation. Noah realized there was one crucial question he still feared to ask, but needed to. "Emily," he began, hesitating, his fingers drumming nervously on his knee. "Are you absolutely certain they're mine? I mean, biologically?" Emily's face hardened instantly, as if a door had just slammed shut. Her eyes, which had started to show a hint of warmth, went cold again. "You're asking if I had other relationships while we were together?" "No, that's not it," he blurted, realizing too late how it sounded. "It's just, doctors told me I was basically infertile. Even before the infection, they were certain I had serious issues, because of cryptorchidism, I guess. I took tests as a teenager that already showed problems. That's why I'm confused." Emily took a deep breath, her expression softening slightly when she saw his genuine confusion. "There was no one else but you, Noah." "Never," she said simply. "And the girls were born exactly 9 months after our last time together. If you do the math, that last night, before you traveled." Noah vividly remembered that night, a desperate, almost frantic goodbye, as if both sensed it was the end. "Also," Emily added with a slight smile, "Lily is your spitting image. Not just physically, her chin, her forehead, but her temperament too. Stubborn, determined, always aiming higher. Grace is more like me, but the way she furrows her brow when concentrating, that's all you—" Noah couldn't help but smile. He'd noticed those resemblances immediately, even if he didn't want to admit it. "But I understand why you're confused," Emily went on. "If you want proof—" Noah looked at her, suddenly ashamed of his suspicion, even if it was based on medical facts. "I would like a DNA test," he finally said, forcing the words out. "Not because I doubt you, but because I need to understand how this was possible, for my own peace of mind, and maybe for the girls' future medical needs too." Emily met his eyes with steady calm. There was no anger, just a quiet resolve born of years raising 2 kids alone. "If you don't believe me, then do it." The gesture was simple but packed with an ocean of contained emotion. Emily's posture, upright, dignified, with no hint of fear or guilt, said more than any words could. Noah felt his throat tighten. The hope that these wonderful girls might truly be his, mixed with guilt for not being there, and fear of what this late fatherhood meant for his carefully ordered life. The sound of small footsteps interrupted the moment. Lily ran into the living room, now in clean clothes and her hair still wild. Grace followed more slowly, watching the adults with that quiet perceptiveness that always seemed to see beyond words. "Are you leaving now?" Lily asked Noah abruptly, stopping in front of him, eyes fixed on his face with a disconcerting intensity. He was caught off guard. He glanced at Emily, looking for guidance, but she merely observed, leaving the situation in his hands. "I do have to go home at some point," Noah said carefully. "But you'll come back, right?" Lily insisted, a flicker of anxiety slipping into her usually confident voice. "Now that we've found you," Grace stayed silent, but her eyes, so much like Emily's, scrutinized Noah's every reaction, as if measuring his sincerity, bracing for disappointment. "Lily," Emily finally interjected, "Noah has a busy life. He has work, responsibilities." "But he's our dad," Lily protested, her childish logic simplifying a complicated situation. Noah felt the weight of those words, "our dad," fall on his shoulders. A title he'd never sought, a responsibility he had always avoided, now personified by two small human beings looking at him with expectation. He realized, with sudden, painful clarity, that whatever he decided now would shape the rest of these children's lives. "Yes," he said at last, surprising even himself with the firmness in his voice. "I'll come back." The joy on Lily's face and the small smile on Grace's lips stirred something within Noah, something he didn't immediately recognize, but which warmed him in a way he hadn't felt for a long time. Emily watched the scene with an unreadable expression, neither fully confident nor entirely skeptical, just waiting, as she had waited for years, to see what Noah Livingston would really do when faced with the truth. The house was quiet that night, except for the occasional sound of cars passing by and the distant murmur of a TV from next door. Emily sat on the edge of Grace's bed, a storybook closed in her lap after their bedtime reading. It was a ritual she had never given up, even on the hardest days, a tale before bed, a moment just for them. But tonight, the girls were different. Meeting Noah had changed something, stirred questions long dormant. Lily was restless in her own bed, tossing and turning as if trying to find not just physical comfort, but a way to calm her mind. Grace, on the other hand, lay completely still, eyes fixed on the bedroom ceiling where Emily had stuck glow-in-the-dark stars. Her gaze reflected the faint shine of those tiny constellations, and her expression had that seriousness that sometimes scared Emily, as if Grace carried an understanding far beyond her years. "It's bedtime," Emily said gently, smoothing the blanket over Grace. "You both had a long day." "You did too, Mom," Lily observed, rolling onto her side to look at her mother. "You changed when you saw him." Emily hesitated, unsure how to respond. She had always tried to be honest with her daughters, but there were truths too complex to put into children's words. "It was, unexpected," she finally answered. "We hadn't seen each other in a very long time." A heavy silence followed, filled with unspoken questions. Emily stood, ready to end the night with her usual forehead kisses, when Grace's soft voice cut through the quiet. "Mum, did you cry because of him?" The question, posed with the simple directness only children can manage, struck Emily like a physical blow. She felt the air leave her lungs for a moment, her hands gripping the book she still held. How to explain tears shed on lonely nights, when her pregnancy advanced and she feared the future? How to talk about the times she looked at Lily, so much like Noah, and felt the sharp pain of his absence, or the girls' birthdays, when part of her wished he were there to see how wonderful they were, while another part resented him for never having the chance to disappoint them. "Sometimes," she answered truthfully, her voice lower than she intended, "but not always out of sadness. Sometimes we cry about things we don't fully understand." Grace nodded, as though the answer made perfect sense. Maybe it did, to her. Is he going to stay in town? She asked, eyes still trained on the ceiling stars. I don't know, honey. He hasn't said. He promised to come back, Lily said, sitting up in bed, all drowsiness forgotten. Tomorrow, maybe, or the next day. He can take us places. Emily sighed. One thing at a time, Lily. Let's see how things go, okay? But Lily wasn't easily dissuaded. Her eyes, so much like Noah's when determined, gleamed in the dim light. He liked us. I know he did, she insisted. But what if he has to travel again? What if... Her voice trailed off. Then, in almost a whisper, she asked what she truly feared. What if he goes away again? The question lingered in the air, heavy as the silence that followed. Emily felt a knot form in her throat. How to promise something that didn't depend solely on her? How to shield her daughters from disappointments she herself couldn't predict or prevent? There was no simple answer, no assurance she could give, only the truth that tomorrow was uncertain, and that loving someone, whether as a father, daughter, or anything else, always involved the risk of loss. Emily didn't reply. Instead, she sat back down, this time between the two beds, extending her arms to gather the girls close. Grace slid off her bed first, followed quickly by Lily. Emily held them tightly, as if trying to protect them from the world and the past all at once. Her arms formed a circle of safety where, at least for this moment, they could feel completely secure. She felt Grace's breath against her neck, the scent of children's shampoo in her hair. She felt Lily squeezing her with that intensity that defined everything the girl did. Two parts of her heart, two lives she had shaped on her own, now facing changes she couldn't control. In that silent embrace, suspended between a past they couldn't change and a future they couldn't predict, there was only mother and daughters, united, perhaps incomplete, but whole in their own way. Whatever role Noah would play from now on, this core would remain, forged by years of absence but also by a constant presence, their presence for each other. Noah stared at the envelope on his desk, white and simple, with the lab's logo in the corner. Inside was a piece of paper that would confirm or deny what his heart already knew. His hands trembled slightly as he finally opened it, sliding out the document. The test had been done discreetly, just a few saliva samples, taken during a casual visit with the girls. With Emily's silent permission, no one else needed to know. He'd insisted. It was only for his peace of mind. His eyes skimmed over the technical details and scientific terms until he found what he was looking for. Probability of paternity. 98% positive. Noah was Grace and Lily's biological father. He let the paper fall onto the table, releasing a deep breath. There was no real surprise, only the final confirmation of what he'd sensed when he first laid eyes on them. Something beyond physical resemblance, a bond science or numbers alone couldn't fully explain. He sat for long minutes, contemplating what the result meant. 6 lost years. First steps he hadn't witnessed, first words he hadn't heard, feverish nights he hadn't helped soothe, an emptiness he could never fill. But it also meant possibilities, future birthdays, school graduations, conversations yet to happen, a chance, if Emily allowed it and if the girls accepted him, to be more than a stranger who shared their DNA. With that thought, he drove to the house with the blue door, the test result folded in his jacket pocket. It was a Sunday afternoon, and the girls were playing on the small porch. Lily spotted his car first, waving excitedly for Grace to come look. "You came back?" Lily called, running toward him as soon as he stepped out of the car. Noah smiled, still not quite used to the unconditional adoration Lily showed him. "I promised I would, didn't I?" Grace stayed on the porch, watching with those insightful eyes that seemed beyond her years. Noah waved at her, receiving a timid wave in return. "Mum's inside sewing," Lily announced, grabbing his hand automatically. "Come on, let's show her you're here." The familiarity of that small hand in his, trusting, sure it would be well received, squeezed Noah's heart. He let her lead him inside, where Emily was seated at her sewing machine, focused on a dark blue fabric that looked like a school uniform. She looked up when they entered, her expression neutral, unreadable. In recent days, they had reached a cautious truce. He'd visited the girls several times, always respecting the schedule Emily set, never crossing the silent boundaries she established. "Girls, would you mind playing outside for a few minutes?" Noah asked, trying to sound casual despite his tension. "I need to talk to your mom," Lily pouted, but Grace gently tugged her hand. "Come on, Lily. We can finish that rock castle." Once alone, Emily turned off the sewing machine and faced him, her hands resting calmly in her lap. Waiting. Noah removed the envelope from his pocket and set it on the table between them. "It arrived today," he said simply. Emily didn't look at the envelope. Her eyes remained on his, as if searching for something more important than any printed results. "And?" she asked at last. "Positive," Noah answered, his voice raspier than he expected. "I'm their father." Silence filled the room, broken only by the distant sounds of the girls laughing outside. Emily showed no surprise, no relief, no resentment, just a calm acknowledgement of what she'd known for years. Noah took a step forward, finally voicing the words he'd been rehearsing all the way over. "I'm sorry, Emily. I didn't know. If I had—" She interrupted him with a gentle motion, standing up so they were at eye level. "You didn't believe me," she said, her voice serene without accusation, simply stating a fact. "I told you they were your daughters. You needed paper to confirm what anyone could see in their eyes." Noah opened his mouth to protest, but realized she was right. He had doubted her, not because he believed Emily would lie, but because it was easier to question reality than face its consequences. "I know I can't undo the past," he admitted, "but from now on is what matters for them," Emily finished, her gaze drifting briefly to the window where the girls could be seen playing. "If you decide to stay, really stay, I want you to know something, Noah. I don't want them hurt. They've imagined this moment 1,000 times in their little heads. Reality rarely competes with a child's dreams." Noah nodded, understanding the weight of her words. Emily wasn't talking about legal documents or financial arrangements. She was talking about small as fragile hearts, trusting and hopeful. "I'll try," he promised. "I don't know how to be a dad, but I'll learn." Emily studied his face for a long moment, as if judging the sincerity behind that promise. Then, with a slight nod, she walked to the front door and opened it. "They're waiting," she said simply. "Why don't you start by showing them how to build a real castle?" Noah understood. It was a dismissal for now, permission to be with his daughters, and a reminder that reconciliation with the past wouldn't come through lab results. It would come, if at all, with time, with consistency, with daily proof that he was no longer the man who left 6 years ago. He nodded and stepped through the door Emily held open. She closed it behind him with gentle firmness. The envelope with the test result remained on the table, forgotten. It no longer mattered. The truth was outside, running toward him with open arms and trusting smiles. Morning arrived with a clear sky and a soft breeze, as if nature itself wanted to make up for the storms of the previous days, both literal and emotional. Noah woke early after another restless night's sleep. Something felt different now, a feeling he couldn't fully name. During breakfast, sitting alone at his massive dining table, he reflected on the conversation from the day before, the DNA test, the confirmation he already sensed in his heart, Emily's calm expression. "You didn't believe me." Her words echoed, not as an accusation, but as a simple truth he couldn't deny. He had arrived expecting, perhaps gratitude that he'd accepted his paternity, maybe some emotional reconciliation, but Emily had stood firm on her boundaries. The girls were her priority, not Noah's wounded feelings or his belated need for redemption. The clock read just past 9 p.m. when Noah made an impulsive decision. Without an elaborate plan or strategy, unusual for a man who had built his career carefully calculating every move, he grabbed his car keys and left. He already knew the route to the house with the blue door by heart, the corner flower shop, the noisy dog, the rows of modest homes. He parked a short distance away and walked to the door. He hadn't brought any expensive gifts or grand promises. He only brought himself, for once fully present. He took a deep breath and knocked lightly, 2 gentle taps. Seconds passed before he heard footsteps. The door opened, and there stood Emily, wearing simple jeans and a faded t-shirt, her hair in a casual bun. She looked surprised to see him so early and without warning. "Noah," she said, not quite a greeting, more an acknowledgement of his presence. He had rehearsed countless lines on the drive, explanations, justifications, promises, but in front of her, all those prepared words vanished, leaving only a straightforward question. "May I see the girls?" The request was humble, direct, unadorned by conditions. Just a man wanting to see his daughters, without claiming any rights or making demands. Emily studied him for a moment, her gaze scanning his face as if searching for something specific. She didn't answer directly. She didn't say yes or no. She just turned partially toward the interior of the house and called out, "Girls, there's someone here to see you." The sound of hurried steps echoed from inside the house, and seconds later Lily burst out, still in pajamas, her hair a wild halo around her face. Her eyes went wide when she saw Noah, and an enormous smile lit up her features. "You came back," she exclaimed, rushing forward without hesitation. Noah crouched instinctively, welcoming Lily's slightly clumsy hug. Over her shoulder, he saw Grace standing in the hallway, watching the scene with her usual caution. She wore striped pajamas, holding a book close to her chest like a shield. "Good morning," he said to Grace, not pushing for more physical contact, respecting her space. She gave him a small nod, a tentative half-smile appearing on her lips. "Why are you here so early?" Lily asked, pulling away from the hug but keeping her hands on his shirt. "Did you bring presents?" "Lily," Emily gently scolded, "we don't ask people for presents." "No presents today," Noah admitted, "but I had an idea. If your mum agrees," he glanced at Emily, silently asking permission, "I'd like to take you both on an outing." Lily's eyes gleamed with excitement. "An outing? Where? In your big car? Grace, did you hear that?" Grace inched closer, curiosity overcoming timidity. "What kind of outing?" she asked, her calm voice contrasting with her sister's enthusiasm. Noah sat on the doorstep, putting himself at the girl's eye level. A simple gesture, but it meant not towering over them. "I was thinking something simple," he said. "Maybe the city park, or that new botanical garden that opened last year. Places where we can talk and get to know each other better. No rush." Emily watched the interaction in silence, leaning against the door frame. Noah could feel her measuring his intentions, but not in a hostile way, more like a mother bear, protective of her cubs. "I want to go," Lily declared, bouncing on her toes. "Can we get ice cream too and ride paddle boats if they have them at the park?" "And—" "Lily," Emily interrupted gently, "let Noah breathe. And you two need to get dressed and have breakfast first, if you want to go." Emily's words were an implicit permission, and Noah felt a wave of gratitude. She wasn't making it easy. He still needed to prove himself consistent, but she wasn't shutting him out. "Can I bring my book?" Grace asked, lifting the volume she held. "Of course," Noah replied, noticing for the first time the title, a book about constellations and night sky myths. "You like astronomy?" Grace nodded. "There are lots of stories in the stars. My dad showed me some constellations when I was a kid," Noah said. "Maybe I can show you the ones I remember." A small spark of interest lit Grace's eyes, the first genuine connection between them. Meanwhile, Lily pulled her sister back inside, chattering about what outfit to wear and which toy to bring. Emily waited until the girls were out of earshot before turning to Noah. "They'll be ready in half an hour," she said, voice neutral. "Bring them back by lunchtime, around noon." Noah nodded, accepting the boundaries she had set. "Thank you," he said simply. "Don't thank me," Emily replied. "Just make it worth their while." Waiting on the small porch steps, Noah realized something vital he hadn't noticed on his previous visits. He wasn't there to prove anything to Emily, or to redeem his past, or even to claim a legal paternal role. He was there simply because he wanted to know Grace and Lily, not as extensions of himself or to fill a void in his life, but as people in their own right, with personalities, fears and dreams he barely knew yet. When they finally reappeared, Lily talking a mile a minute and Grace clutching her book carefully, he stood up with a genuine smile. The day lay before them, filled with simple possibilities. talking on a park bench, laughter, maybe even ice cream melting in the morning sun. It was a humble beginning, no grand promises or dramatic gestures, just a man learning, at last, how to be present. After the outing with the girls, Noah sensed something shifting inside him. Not a dramatic moment of revelation, but a slow awakening, like dawn gradually lighting the sky until all darkness is gone. Grace and Lily were no longer an abstract idea of fatherhood. They were real people, with distinct personalities, fears and hopes he was beginning to discover. Late that night, sitting in his home office, Noah stared at his computer screen. Despite the hours spent with his daughters, one side of the story remained in the shadows: Emily. The woman who had raised 2 children alone, who had never asked for a thing, who had kept the door open for him to meet them despite years of absence. He replayed his recent conversations with the girls in his mind, casual mentions of their house. "Mom said we might have to move soon," Lily had mentioned while licking an ice cream cone at the park. "She stays up late doing the bills," Grace had added, displaying that sharp insight that never ceased to amaze him. Spurred by a curiosity no longer about proving paternity, but understanding the world in which his daughters lived, Noah began to dig. First, basic details: the address with the blue door, property records, payment history. For a man with his connections and resources, it wasn't difficult. What he found made his stomach sink. The house didn't belong to Emily. It was a rental, and the records showed late payments for the last 6 months. Delving deeper, he found a pending eviction notice dated only a week prior. Emily and the girls had less than 30 days before they'd be forced out of the only home Grace and Lily had ever known. Investigating further, he uncovered the debts. They weren't extravagant or reckless spending. They were the small, devastating accumulations of a single mother's life. Medical bills from when Grace had pneumonia 2 years ago. A loan for a better sewing machine after the old one broke. Late installments from the small shop where Emily worked part-time in addition to her home sewing. The story told by these numbers was clear and painful. Emily had held on bravely for years, balancing on the tightrope that many single parents know. Saving here, sacrificing there, always putting the girls' well-being above any personal comfort. Noah closed the laptop, feeling suddenly ill. For years, he'd lived in his imposing mansion, focused on investments and business expansions, while just a few miles away, Emily had fought to keep a roof over their daughters' heads, daughters who were also his. Standing, he walked to the window, looking out at the night. He recalled her words, spoken with that quiet dignity she always had. "We managed just fine." How much pride had it taken to say those words while facing the reality of eviction? How much fear had she felt, alone in the midnight hours, calculating and recalculating numbers that never seemed to add up? This revelation wasn't just about financial troubles. It was about a strength Noah was only beginning to grasp. Emily had never used the girls as leverage. She never showed up at his door demanding support. She never burdened her children with adult problems, and they spoke of their mom with admiration, never pity. Noah felt the crushing weight of everything she had shouldered alone. Birthdays, nights of fevers, daily worries, piling bills, and above all, the responsibility of raising 2 girls to believe in themselves and the world, even when that world felt like it was caving in on them. The mansion around him felt suddenly empty, in a way he'd never perceived before. It wasn't just the lack of people, it was a lack of lived life, shared struggles, hard-won joys. What did his professional successes mean compared to what Emily had accomplished with so little? He sat again, making a decision not born of guilt or obligation, but of deep respect that was just beginning to blossom. He couldn't change the past, those lost years, Emily's solitary battles, but he could be present now in ways that truly mattered. The sun was already rising when he finally went back to bed, his mind still reeling from what he'd discovered. The house with the blue door wasn't just a home. It was a fortress Emily had built to protect her daughters from a world that hadn't forgiven her status as a single mom. And now that fortress was under threat, Noah fell asleep with a clarity he hadn't felt in years. His next step wasn't about him, about redemption or reclaiming lost time. It was about ensuring Grace and Lily could go on growing in the only home they knew, under the care of a woman who had sacrificed everything to provide them stability. The challenge would be convincing Emily to accept help without wounding the pride that had sustained her for so long, and that, Noah was beginning to realize, might be the hardest battle he had ever faced. Morning was bright when Noah parked his car in front of the house with the blue door. He'd spent the night tossing and turning, dwelling on everything he'd learned, weighing his options, trying to find the best way to approach the situation without trampling Emily's pride. In the end, he concluded that straightforward honesty was the only option. His heart pounded as he walked up to the door. It was an unfamiliar feeling for a man used to high-stakes negotiations where composure and control were his trademarks. But this was different. This wasn't about mergers or corporate deals. It was about two little girls and the woman who had raised them alone. He took a steadying breath and knocked firmly. It was several moments before the door opened. Emily appeared, wearing simple work clothes, her face showing surprise that quickly shifted to caution. Her eyes scanned Noah's face, noticing something new in his expression. "Noah," she said, not a question, not quite a greeting, just acknowledgement. "We need to talk," he replied without preamble. "It's important." "May I come in?" Emily hesitated briefly, then opened the door wider, a silent invitation. The house was quiet. Likely the girls were already at school at this hour. "I'm about to leave for work," Emily said, as she led him into the small living room. "What's so urgent?" Noah didn't sit. He remained standing, his eyes flicking briefly around the room, noticing details he hadn't before: a letter from a law office on the table, a pile of bills next to the sewing machine, a list of potential rental apartments scribbled in a notebook. "I found out about the debts," he said at last, more bluntly than he intended. "I know about the eviction." Emily's expression hardened instantly, her posture changing from weary to defensive in a heartbeat, her eyes, always so expressive, darkened with a mix of shame and anger. "You've been digging into my life." Her voice was low, controlled, but Noah could feel the tension thrumming in each syllable. "It wasn't like that," he tried to explain, realizing too late how his words sounded. "After spending time with the girls, a few things they said made me worry. I just wanted to understand." "Understand what, exactly?" Emily cut him off. "That I'm not rich like you, that raising two kids alone is difficult, that not everyone can afford to live in a mansion." The bitterness in her voice caught him by surprise. Emily had always been composed, diplomatic even in the worst of times. Seeing her like this, mask off, revealed the true weight she'd carried alone all these years. "I can help," Noah offered, keeping his voice calm. "Financially, legally, whatever is needed." Emily's gaze was cold as she folded her arms, creating a physical barrier between them. "I've managed on my own until now. I don't need you." Her words were sharp, but Noah sensed the vulnerability beneath them. It wasn't just pride. It was fear of depending on someone who had once let her down, fear of lowering the fortress she'd built for herself and the girls. "I know you're capable," he responded, sincerity in his tone. "You've proven it more times than anyone should have to. But that doesn't mean you have to keep fighting alone." Emily looked away, focusing on the window overlooking the street. "What do you want, Noah? To ease your conscience, to feel better for having been absent all these years?" Her question was fair, and he knew it. Part of him did seek redemption, a way to atone for lost time. But there was more now, something that went beyond guilt or duty. "I want the girls to be safe and stable," he finally said. "I want them to have the best life possible, and that includes not losing the only home they've ever known." Noah took a deep breath, choosing his next words carefully. "Please accept for the girls. It would be so hard for you all not to have a place to live. They've gone through enough changes already. Losing the house now." He left the sentence unfinished, letting the words hang in the air, heavy with sincerity. This wasn't a negotiation tactic or manipulation, just the plain truth. Emily opened her mouth to respond, but a sound in the hallway cut her short. Both turned to see Lily and Grace standing there, still in their pajamas, faces marked by confusion and concern. "Shouldn't you be getting ready for school?" Emily asked, trying to keep her voice light, though Noah sensed her effort. "We heard voices," Lily explained, her big eyes darting between her mom and Noah. Are you fighting? We're not fighting, Noah assured quickly. Just talking about grown-up stuff. About our house, Grace asked, always more perceptive than she should be. About us having to move. Emily closed her eyes briefly, as though summoning strength. When she opened them, resignation shone in them, something that clenched Noah's heart. Yes, sweetie. We're talking about the house. Is Noah going to help us stay? Lily asked with painful hope in her voice. A heavy silence filled the room. The girls looked at the adults expectantly, while Emily and Noah exchanged a loaded glance. The choice between them was no longer about money or pride. It was about what was best for two children who, unknowingly, had overheard more than they should. Mum, please, Grace said, so quietly that her voice trembled. Her eyes, so much like Emily's, pleaded silently. Next to her, Lily chewed her lower lip, waiting anxiously. Emily swallowed hard, and Noah saw the tears she was holding back. She took a deep breath as if making the toughest decision of her life. Maybe she was. We can talk about it, she said at last, each word sounding as if it were pulled from her unwillingly. Later. Right now, you two need to get dressed for school, and I need to get to work. It was a small concession, but a significant one. A door slightly ajar, where before there had only been a wall. Noah felt immense relief, but also a renewed sense of responsibility. This wasn't a victory. It was a chance Emily was giving, not to him, but to the daughters she loved more than her own pride. Thank you, he said softly, as the girls reluctantly headed back to their room. Emily only nodded, her eyes still bright with unshed tears. Don't make me regret this, she whispered, her voice laden with contained emotion. Noah understood the true weight of those words. This wasn't just about money or a house, it was about trust, the most fragile and precious thing Emily could offer after everything she'd been through, and he silently vowed he would not let her down this time. The changes didn't come in a grand or flashy way. They came in small gestures, quiet moments, and a steady presence that no one had asked for but everyone began to expect. Noah didn't move into the house with the blue door, nor did he try to take on the role of head of the family. Instead, he just showed up, simply showed up. First, there were the financial matters. Without fanfare, the overdue rent was paid. The eviction order cancelled. Grace's medical debts covered. Emily found the receipts in a plain envelope on the kitchen table when she got home from work one night. There was no card, no note, only the papers representing a huge weight lifted off her shoulders. She didn't thank him verbally, and Noah didn't expect it. The brief nod he received the next day was enough, a silent acknowledgement between adults forging a new way to coexist, not for themselves, but for the two kids who unknowingly bound them forever. In the weeks that followed, Noah started appearing at unexpected times. One Saturday morning, he showed up with cans of paint and tools to fix the leaking ceiling. On a Wednesday evening, he arrived with grocery bags, not filled with expensive luxury items, but with the staples Emily normally bought, plus some fresh fruit usually beyond her budget. You don't have to do this, Emily commented once, when he brought a new chair to replace one that had recently broken. I know, he replied simply. It wasn't about obligation, it was about doing what he could, when he could, in whatever ways he could. The girls watched this new dynamic with wide eyes, soaking in every detail. For Lily, it was the confirmation of her hopes. The dad she'd always imagined was finally present. For Grace, more cautious by nature, every new appearance by Noah was analyzed, weighed, compared to the last, as though she were mentally building a chart of reliability. As August approached, bringing with it the promise of a new school year, Noah asked if he could help with the girls' school supplies. Emily, who would normally buy only the bare essentials, reusing last year's notebooks when possible, hesitated briefly before nodding. Nothing fancy, she warned. They don't need the most expensive stuff. Noah understood. This wasn't about denying them or limiting them, it was about values. Emily didn't want her daughters growing up thinking material items equaled personal worth. She had raised two kids who appreciated what they had and understood the value of hard work and simplicity. So the following Saturday, Noah took the girls shopping for school supplies. They didn't go to any upscale department stores, but to the same neighborhood stationery shop Emily frequented. The difference was that this time, Lily and Grace got to choose notebooks with bright covers, pencils that weren't the cheapest on the shelf, and brand new backpacks that wouldn't need to last 3 consecutive years. The joy on their faces when they showed Emily their new supplies was priceless. It wasn't about the items themselves, Noah realized, but about the normalcy they represented, starting the school year like other kids, free from the burden of scarcity. A routine began to form, almost imperceptibly. Noah would come for dinner 2 or 3 times a week. On Sundays, he would take the girls out, giving Emily a few hours of well-deserved rest. During these moments, he learned more about his daughters, their school friends, favorite books, little fears, and big dreams. Lily loved telling stories, weaving fact and fantasy, with a creativity that often left Noah amazed. "You should write this down," he remarked once, after hearing an elaborate tale about a princess who built bridges between warring kingdoms. "Really?" she asked, eyes shining with validation. "Really? I'd buy that book," he said earnestly. The next evening, when he arrived for dinner, Lily was hunched over a notebook, writing furiously, tongue caught between her teeth in concentration. Emily explained she had started right after coming home from their outing, determined to make her story into a real book. With Grace, significant moments came differently. She didn't open up easily, didn't share thoughts or feelings unless she was sure they would be received seriously. Noah learned to wait, to give her space, to cherish the small instances when she chose to let him in. Like the time, after weeks of helping her with math homework, she silently handed him a drawing, a tall man holding hands with 2 little girls, with the words, "My family," carefully written underneath. Or when she began, very gradually, texting him good night on the emergency cell phone Emily kept for safety. The change in Emily was more subtle, more guarded. She still maintained her clear boundaries, still juggled work and motherhood without showing vulnerability. Yet something had softened in her stance, not a surrender, but a reluctant acceptance that maybe, just maybe, sharing some burdens didn't mean giving up her independence. One evening, as Noah was leaving after helping the girls with homework, Emily called him back. "Do you plan to keep this up?" she asked directly. Showing up, helping, being around. It wasn't accusatory. It was practical, realistic. Emily trying to determine if she should allow her daughters to grow accustomed to this new reality. Noah thought for a moment before answering, not to craft a diplomatic reply, but to be honest. "Yes," he finally said. "Not out of guilt or obligation, because I want to, because they deserve it, because I found out I actually like being a dad." Emily studied his face for a long moment, as if searching for any sign of deceit or hesitation. Finally, she nodded slightly. "They're getting used to you," she said, a warning and a concession all at once. "I know," he replied, fully aware of the weight in those words. It was on a September afternoon, once school had started, that the moment arrived. Noah had taken the girls for ice cream after class, a small celebration of their strong start to the year. They were sitting on a park bench, Lily animatedly recounting her science project, when Grace, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, suddenly asked, "Do you promise you won't disappear?" Her question halted even Lily's endless chatter. A heavy silence fell among them, thick with the meaning behind those simple words. Noah felt the weight of Grace's doubt, the uncertainty she must have harbored over the weeks, observing his every move, bracing for the day he might vanish as he had before. He could have made a grand speech, sworn by the sun and moon, offered lavish guarantees. Instead, he looked directly into Grace's serious eyes and answered, with the quiet conviction of absolute certainty, "Never again." His promise didn't come with fanfare, but with truth. It wasn't made to impress or to soothe old guilt. It was a simple, direct commitment to the future of her, Lily, and himself. Grace didn't smile or jump for joy the way Lily might have. She simply nodded, as though confirming something she already suspected, and returned to her ice cream. But Noah noticed her small shoulders relax, like a weight had been lifted. In that ordinary moment, seated on a park bench with melting ice cream, the sound of other children playing in the background, Noah realized he had found something all his professional success and material wealth could never offer. A simple, profound purpose measured not by acquisitions or achievements, but by fulfilled promises and steadfast presence. Understood. I'll make adjustments to the chapter. I'll remove the line you didn't like and rewrite that portion. The seasons were shifting, bringing the first hints of autumn. Golden leaves occasionally danced along the sidewalks, and mornings arrived with a light mist soon burned off by the sun. Amid this natural transition, another transformation was unfolding. More subtle, more intricate, more profound. Emily watched, not obviously or intrusively, but with the eyes of someone who had learned to observe nuances for survival. In recent months, Noah had become a constant presence in their lives, not as a trespasser, but as a genuine addition to the small world she had built with her daughters. She noted the differences. This was not the same man who had left 6 years earlier. That Noah had been ambitious, impatient, always looking toward the next achievement, the next conquest. The one who now sat on the living room floor helping Lily with a solar system project for the science fair was different. A certain humility now resided in him that hadn't existed before, like the time he tried cooking with the girls and completely burned the pasta, filling the kitchen with smoke. The old Noah would have been angry at failing. This one laughed until he cried along with the girls, then ordered pizza and turned the mishap into an impromptu movie night. "You don't know how to do anything right," Lily exclaimed through giggles as he scrubbed the charred pot. "That's why I'm learning from you," he replied, with none of the old wounded pride. Emily had slipped away quietly that night, returning to her room with an odd feeling in her chest, something she wouldn't name, but recognized as dangerously close to hope. These small changes continued. Noah, who once measured success by deals closed and profits earned, now proudly showed off photos on his phone of the first equation Grace solved on her own. The man who once viewed holidays as missed business opportunities now faithfully reserved every Sunday to spend with the girls, regardless of what appointments he needed to reshuffle. One Sunday afternoon, Emily came home early from visiting her friend Claire. She froze at the entrance upon hearing laughter, not just her daughter's but Noah's deep, unguarded laugh. A laugh she hadn't heard in so long she'd nearly forgotten its sound. He was sitting on the worn living room rug, a crooked paper crown on his head, holding a wooden spoon as if it were a royal scepter. Grace and Lily, similarly adorned with their own makeshift crowns, were conducting what appeared to be a highly serious coronation ceremony. "Now you must swear to protect the kingdom," Lily ordered with the solemnity of a true monarch. "And take care of the dragons," Grace added, usually so serious, her eyes now sparkling with amusement. "I, King Noah, solemnly swear to protect the kingdom and take care of the dragons," he repeated with comic gravity, raising the wooden spoon as though making the most important vow. Emily stood rooted to the spot, an unfamiliar emotion constricting her throat. This was the same man who once declared that kids got in the way of his life. The relentless executive who seldom smiled in public. This was Noah Livingston, a respected and feared CEO, kneeling on a worn rug, wearing a paper crown, solemnly promising to protect imaginary dragons. A real father. When he finally noticed her standing in the doorway, his smile didn't falter or become self-conscious. Instead, he simply waved his scepter, including her in the game. "We need a queen to complete the royal court," he said, casual as could be, making Emily's heart skip a tiny beat. "Mom can be the queen," Lily agreed enthusiastically. Emily hesitated only briefly before allowing herself to join in the fantasy. Maybe that was exactly what was happening in her real life. A prolonged hesitation at the prospect of believing in something that seemed too good to be true. In small moments like this, she caught herself smiling in a way she hadn't in a long time. It wasn't the guarded smile she wore at work, nor the tender smile she had for her daughters. It was something more, something accompanied by a soft flush and a lightness she'd forgotten was possible. The heart she had kept protected behind walls of distrust and self-reliance was quietly discovering tiny cracks in its defenses, not a dramatic surrender or a sudden collapse, rather a slow thaw, like snow gradually yielding to the sun after a long winter. It was on a Saturday afternoon, when Noah had taken the girls to a trial swimming lesson, that the confrontation occurred. Emily was home alone, sorting through receipts, something she now did with far less anxiety, when a loud knocking startled her. Opening the door, she found Jake, her brother, on the porch with a tense, worried expression. "I just saw his car at the club," Jake said without preamble, stepping inside before being invited. "He was with the girls." "What's going on, Emily?" Emily shut the door calmly, bracing herself for the conversation she knew would come. Jake had been her greatest support through the tough years, the only one there when Noah left, when she was pregnant, when everything seemed to fall apart. His resentment toward Noah was deep and understandable. "Noah's been spending time with the girls," she answered simply. "They like it." Jake let out a dry laugh, devoid of humor. "Of course they do. They don't know who he really is." "Jake, no, Emily, you can't be serious." He ran a hand through his hair, a nervous gesture reminiscent of their father. "He left you. He abandoned you, alone, pregnant, and now, after 6 years, he just shows up, and you forgive him. Let him into the girls' lives like nothing happened." His words hit sensitive points, doubts she herself had wrestled with during lonely nights. But something was different now. Something Jake couldn't see, because he hadn't witnessed the silent transformation of recent months. "He's not the same man," Emily said, surprising herself with how firm her voice sounded. "People don't change like that, Emily. You know better." But he did. She took a deep breath, organizing thoughts she hadn't fully voiced even to herself. "I'm not saying it was easy or instant. I'm not saying I forgot what happened. I'm saying the man who's with the girls now is different from the one who left." Jake eyed her for a long moment, worry and skepticism warring in his gaze. "What happened to you?" he finally asked. "The Emily I know wouldn't let down her guard like this." The question hit harder than she expected. What had happened to her? When had she begun to believe again? When had she allowed hope, that dangerous visitor, to return? "Maybe the Emily you know is tired," she replied honestly. "Tired of doing everything alone. Tired of doubting. Tired of being afraid. What if he hurts you again? Worse, what if he hurts the girls?" The genuine concern in his voice moved her. Jake had always been her protector. The older brother who fought off bullies and dried her tears, who had held her when the pregnancy test was positive, and Noah was thousands of miles away, building his empire. "I can't live in fear forever," Emily said softly. "If it happens, we'll handle it. I'm stronger now." Jake sat on the couch, his initial anger giving way to a more controlled worry. "I just don't want to see you hurting again, Ems." Emily sat next to him, taking his hand as she did when they were children. "I know, and I love you for that." She paused. "But Jake, you need to see how he is with them. It's not an act. It's not temporary. He's genuinely trying. And apparently succeeding," Jake said with a reluctant ghost of a smile. Emily nodded, letting herself smile too. "You should see, really see it for yourself before judging." Jake hesitated, years of resentment battling his love for his sister. "Dinner," Emily suggested impulsively. "Next Sunday. You come. See how he interacts with the girls. If after that you still think I'm making a mistake, I promise I'll reconsider everything." She knew it was a risky promise. Jake was stubborn and protective, but he was also fair, and she needed him to see, not just for his support, but also so that someone else could confirm what she witnessed every day, that Noah truly had changed. That the man who now laughed with their daughters, who burned pasta and laughed about it, who showed up consistently even when it rained or important meetings loomed, was genuinely someone else. A man she was beginning, against all odds, to trust again. Sunday dawned under an extraordinarily blue sky, as if nature itself wanted to celebrate something special. Autumn crept in slowly, tinting some leaves gold and red while the sun still offered a gentle warmth. It was one of those perfect days, right out of a postcard. Not too hot, not too cold, just right. Noah arrived early at the house with the blue door, carrying a picnic basket that surprised even him. It wasn't something the old Noah would have done, planning a picnic, making sandwiches, remembering each girl's favorite fruit. But the new person he was becoming found real pleasure in such gestures. The girls greeted him with the comfortable familiarity that now defined their interactions. Lily flinging herself into his arms as always, Grace offering a quieter but no less warm welcome. Emily appeared shortly after, wearing a simple floral dress that, for some reason, reminded Noah of the first time he ever saw her years ago in a coffee shop. A brief tension arose when Noah noticed Jake seated in the living room. Emily's brother kept a neutral expression, still not wholly convinced, but at least willing to observe. The dinner the week before had been tense at first, but had eased as the evening wore on, with Jake witnessing the natural rapport between Noah and the girls. "We're having a picnic," Lily announced excitedly, grabbing Noah's hand and pulling him toward the door. "Uncle Jake is coming too." "If it's not a problem," Jake added, getting up. There was an attempt at cordiality in his voice, though his eyes retained some healthy skepticism. "Of course not," Noah replied sincerely. "The more the merrier." The city park was just a few blocks away. Noah carried the basket meat, while Jake held the blanket and a small cooler with drinks. The girls ran ahead, occasionally rushing back to prod the grown-ups into keeping pace. It was an ordinary sight for many, family members walking to the park on a sunny Sunday, but for them, it was extraordinary. A jigsaw puzzle finally finding its missing pieces, though some edges still felt rough, still settling into place. At the park, they found a perfect spot under a large tree, overlooking the playground and an artificial pond. Jake helped spread out the blanket, while Noah arranged the food. Emily smiled when she saw the sandwiches carefully cut into fun shapes, a small surprise for the girls. "You really thought of everything," she remarked, her voice carrying a hint of something akin to admiration. "I tried," Noah said with a small, modest grin. Jake watched their interaction with interest, noting the subtle changes in his sister, how her eyes lingered a bit longer on Noah, the smile that stayed even when he wasn't looking. Subtle signs only someone who'd known her since childhood would catch. After they ate, the girls were too restless to sit still any longer. Even Grace, usually so calm, seemed caught up in Lily's endless energy. "Can we go play?" Grace asked, her eyes already on the swings a few yards away. "Sure," Emily replied, "but stay where we can see you." She didn't have to say it twice. Within seconds, they were racing across the grass, laughing loudly, competing for the swings. "I'll keep an eye on them," Jake offered, standing up. His look implied he was giving Noah and Emily space to talk, a gesture neither missed. Alone again, Emily and Noah were quiet for a moment. So many things to say, yet words felt inadequate for what they were feeling. "Want to take a walk?" Noah suggested. Emily nodded, rising and adjusting her dress. They started walking slowly along a dirt path circling the pond, always keeping the girls in sight. Their silence gradually shifted from uncomfortable to comfortable, like the return of a once familiar melody. They watched the girls at a distance, Lily pumping higher and higher on the swing, Jake vigilant beside her, while Grace was more interested in picking wildflowers near the playground. "You really have changed," Emily finally said, breaking the silence. It wasn't a question, but a statement, Noah looked at her, noticing how the sunlight enhanced the tones in her dark hair, how her eyes looked brighter outdoors. He remembered how desperately he'd once been in love with her, and how, in his blind ambition, he'd let that love come second. "You and they showed me how," he replied honestly. They walked on in silence for a few more steps before Noah stopped. His gaze moved between the girls playing and Emily's face, as though mustering courage for something crucial. "Thank you for letting me meet them," he said, voice laden with emotion. "I never wanted to be a father. I always thought kids would get in the way, but I was wrong. Being a dad is the best thing that's ever happened to me." The words hung between them, simple but profound. They weren't excuses for the past. They had moved beyond that. They were an acknowledgement of the present, of the unexpected journey that had brought them here. Emily looked at him with a small, sincere smile, the kind that starts in the eyes before reaching the lips. Noah realized there were no more walls between them, not really. Only a distance shrinking day by day, with small but steady steps in the same direction. Watching from afar, Jake noticed them pause in their walk. The way they looked at each other, the closeness that hadn't been there weeks ago. Part of him still wanted to protect his sister, worried she might get hurt again. But another part, the part that loved her and wanted her happiness, could see the genuine change. That was when Grace ran up to her parents, hands full of the wildflowers she'd carefully gathered. Her normally serious face shone with a rare, precious smile. "Mom, look." "Dad, these are for you too," she announced, offering her treasure as though it were the most valuable gift in the world. Emily opened her hand to receive the flowers, and Noah, on an impulse both new and familiar, placed his hand over hers. The touch was light, almost shy, like a first contact after years of absence. Grace observed the gesture with watchful eyes, always quietly noting. A small smile crossed her face before she dashed off again to join Lily and Jake. There, hands joined over a bundle of humble wildflowers, Emily and Noah stood in silence. Not the silence loaded with unspoken words that once drove them apart, but a new kind of silence, peaceful, comfortable, filled with possibilities. For the first time in a long while, everything felt right, simple, at peace. Jake couldn't hear their conversation from where he sat, but he could see its effect on his sister. The way her shoulders had relaxed, the way her smile came more naturally. It was like seeing the Emily of years ago, before the worries, before sleepless nights, counting pennies for bills. When they all gathered around the picnic blanket again, a new dynamic existed between them. Not perfectly defined, still forming, but undeniably real. The girls sensed it too, moving among the adults with renewed confidence, as though the pieces of their world were finally falling into place. "Look what Uncle Jake and I found," Lily exclaimed, showing a perfectly shaped pine cone. "Can we plant it and grow a Christmas tree at home?" Emily laughed, patiently explaining that pine cones didn't work exactly that way, while Noah promised they could still use it for holiday decorations. Jake watched, recognizing in Noah something he never thought possible: a father, not just biologically, but in essence, presence and commitment. He remembered a promise he'd made years ago, when he'd held Emily as she cried after Noah left. "If he ever comes back, I won't let him hurt you again." Now, seeing Noah help Grace craft a flower crown from the small treasures she'd picked, Jake started to suspect that perhaps, just perhaps, that promise would never need to be enforced. The man before him didn't seem capable of hurting his sister anymore. Paragraph intentionally omitted in accordance with your request. "You still don't fully trust him, do you?" Emily asked, sitting beside Jake while Noah helped the girls. Jake hesitated. "I'm starting to," he finally admitted. "He does seem different." "He is," Emily affirmed. "And so am I. We've all changed, Jake." Her brother nodded slowly. "What matters is that you and the girls are happy, and you seem to be." Emily smiled, a genuine, radiant smile Jake hadn't seen in years. "We are," she said simply. The day drifted on, the sun dipping lower in the sky. The children ran across the grass, still laughing, vying for the highest swing or finding the prettiest flowers on the ground. Emily and Noah strolled slowly along the dirt path, watching them from afar. A new lightness existed between them, something beyond the physical attraction or intellectual compatibility they had once shared. It was a deeper understanding, born from mistakes, loss, and finally, conscious choices to do better. As the sun set and the cool evening breeze reminded them it was time to go, they gathered their things in a contented silence. The girls, tired but happy, walked between the adults, Grace holding Noah's hand, Lily holding Jake's, forming a human chain as they headed home. The silence at last sounded like home. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next ones. Leave a like because it helps this story get recommended to more people. See you in the next story.